I have with me Judge Roy Moore, and I have to say, the judge is a good man. I met with him over the years. Last year or maybe the year before, my producer and I, James, went down to Montgomery, Alabama. We met with the judge in his chambers there, and it was absolutely a perfect visit. I enjoyed talking to the judge. I think we met for about an hour or so. And I really appreciated the time he gave and spent with us. Judge Roy Moore is back. He's been on my show several times. He was twice elected Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Alabama and is now running for U.S. Senate, replacing Jeff Sessions. And he's in a runoff for September, I believe. Judge Moore, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning, Jesse. It's nice to be with you, sir.
Yes, sir. Really good to have you back. First, congratulations on your run for Senate replacing Jeff Sessions. I wish you well with it.
Well, thank you, sir. We're ready for the last, I think, about 4 weeks, just approximately.
Yes, sir. In 2003, a judiciary panel removed you from office for refusing to remove a Ten Commandment monument that you installed in the Alabama Judiciary building. I remember that fight, and what was it like for you going through that?
Well, it was rough because there's such a great misunderstanding of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution that people don't know what it means. Basically, it wasn't about the Ten Commandments at all. It was about the acknowledgement of God upon which the First Amendment is predicated.
You know, I'm always surprised when any American will want to remove the Ten Commandments or anything that really represent freedom, represent this country. What causes a person or people to want to do that?
Well, I guess a misunderstanding of law, a misunderstanding of what religion is. Perhaps some want complete freedom without any restrictions on their behavior, and they call that liberty, which is not liberty.
Yeah.
Is defined by our founding fathers. Actually, liberty was the power to act as one thinks fit without any restraint or control, unless by the law of nature. So we've got to understand that liberty is not the power to do anything you want without God's law.
That's right. You know, Judge, you stood strong for that as well. I've spoken at different events where you were over the years, and I just have so much respect for you. You're what the country needs. I remember back in 2016, you were suspended for upholding a marriage as between one man and one woman. And I'm really stunned that in America today, being a Christian, Judeo-Christian nation, and knowing the order of life and that a marriage is between one man and one woman, that would be happening in our country. And I really appreciated the fact that you stood up for a marriage between a man and a woman.
Well, that was defined by the United States Supreme Court. Prior to that, it's defined out of faith, out of our Christian heritage. It's always in most of the world, it's between a man and a woman. We've simply become a nation that's misguided. We're ruled by 5 lawyers on the Supreme Court, as Chief Justice John Roberts said in his opinion of Burgerfell, and which Justice Scalia echoed. They just, our form of government is not what it should be when we've given over to the rule of man as opposed to the rule of law.
Yeah.
Many people don't understand that. They think that the rule of law is whatever the United States Supreme Court says, even if it contradicts the Constitution, and that's completely fallacious.
It's amazing, too, that anyone would think that 2 men or 2 women calling themselves husband and wife is right or normal. Judge, is it because of the destruction of the family, the public school system going out of whack and removing God from families now, from the public square, that these types of things are even thought about or is especially allowed to happen?
Well, it is, and it's a misunderstanding of our Constitution, and we've got to begin by seeing who's at the root of this, and basically the federal government, having taken over the role of education, now dictates what people must learn in their schools in the state, and that's completely wrong under the Constitution. There's no power in the federal government under Article 1, Section 8 to have any power over education. That belongs to the people. and the states, but not the federal government. And that's where we go when we step outside of the bounds or restrictions. Many of our founding fathers talked about such a thing. James Madison specifically in his Memorial Remonstrance says, because it is proper to take alarm at the first experiment on our liberties. And what he was talking about is when a federal government, for example, our federal government, takes powers which belong to the states under the 10th Amendment, then it's an imposition on our liberty.
Yeah.
And when they do that, it always results in a permanent evil, according to Washington, separation of powers doctrine. It's just something we can't do. I think Madison went on to say that the freemen of America did not wait to usurp power, had strengthened itself by exercise and entangled the question in precedent. They saw all the consequences in the principle, and they avoided the consequences by denying the principle. We revere this lesson too much soon to forget it, and we have forgotten it.
Yeah.
We've forgotten that once you step into an area, then it's hard to get out of it. And when you step into it for seemingly good reasons, it may seem good to do so, but then you eventually becomes a tyranny, and they take away powers that they have no right to.
You know, when I met with you there in Montgomery, Alabama, in your chambers, I was so struck and blessed, I can't find a better word, about your foundation. You are rooted and grounded in what is right. You love the country, you love God, and you are committed to doing what's right. How did you become that way?
Well, Jesse, I don't know. It's through years of experience in dealing with courts, dealing with the law, understanding the Constitution. I was first sworn to the Constitution in 1965 on the banks of the Hudson River at West Point. And, you know, it was many, many years later, I'll say, before I really started to understand that Constitution. I even fought in Vietnam to preserve our country and our freedom and, you know, obedience to my oath, Constitution. I didn't really appreciate it as much then as I do now.
Right.
After having been in the law for a long time and seeing the problems that we have in society and understanding that Constitution is as viable a document as it's ever been, one of the first things that elitists do is try to teach that it's not a relevant document anymore because it's outdated. It doesn't fit the time. On the contrary, human nature does never change.
Yeah.
And therefore, the rules governing that human nature are as viable today as they were back in the days of Washington. We've got to understand that the Constitution was simply the powers of the federal government, that the Declaration of Independence, being our organic law under the United States Code, is there to guide us in our principles and the purpose of government. And if you look at that document, you'll find that the role of government was to secure the rights, the inalienable rights, that God has given us.
Yeah.
So basically, it goes back a long way.
You know, Town Hall is reporting that the Ninth Circuit ruled coaches cannot be punished for praying on a football field. This shouldn't even be an issue. We have the right to pray. Why should this even be an issue, Judge?
Because federal judges, even at the Ninth Circuit, did not know what they're doing under the First Amendment. They've done exactly what I said Madison predicted. Once they step into it and it seems right, then they go astray and they don't understand that there's nothing that forbids an acknowledgement of God. Indeed, our national motto is "In God We Trust."
Yeah.
On every dollar bill they spend and they get paid for it, it's one nation, in God we trust, is marked on that bill. Our Pledge of Allegiance is one nation under God. Our forefathers put that in the pledge to remind us that we should never go without God. In fact, I could go to you and explain what Joseph Story, one of the great justices on the Supreme Court for 37 years under John Marshall, said in his stories on the Constitution about God. He said, it yet remains a problem to be solved in human affairs whether any free government can be permanent, where the public worship of God and the support of religion constitute no part of the policy or duty of the state in any assignable shape. And basically he said we must have a public worship of God. This nation was not founded on any God. It was founded on the God of the Holy Scriptures, the Father of Jesus Christ. It was founded by Pilgrims, Puritans, and others who knew the doctrines well. Were they perfect men? No, they were never perfect. We aren't perfect today.
Yeah.
But this nation has overcome many of these problems because we've learned from the past, which brings up another subject about erasing our past through the removal of monuments. You just can't do that.
I'm talking with Judge Roy Moore, and the judge is in a runoff September 26, 2017 for U.S. Senate seat replacing session. And I saw the judge in a debate with Chris Cuomo, and the judge is a tough guy. He is representing my hometown, or my state where I grew up, down in Alabama, sweet home Alabama. Judge Moore, so as I said, there's a runoff September 26th. You retired from Alabama Supreme Court to run for Senate. Tell us why we should vote for you.
Well, Jesse, I think I could take what I've learned in the military, in combat in Vietnam and West Point, to the United States government and different areas of military service. My judicial knowledge that I learned through the court system, I can explain the alignment of federal and state courts and the rule of law and the supremacy clause under Article 6. There's so much I've learned through the years that I think we need to know in government today. It seems like we're drifting along like a boat without a sail at the United States Congress. They don't know the principles upon which the country was based. We're confused about things like health care, education, and other areas, immigration, so forth. I understand these things, and I hope I can be a leader at the Senate. And I hope that we can restore the greatness, and I think we can, that America once had.
Yeah. And
before we can do that, we've got to restore her goodness.
You know, I believe that this is the right time for you, too, because America we want our country back. We want the values of God, you know, strong families, strong constitution, freedom, the ability to go out and start a business, and we want lower taxes. And speaking of lower taxes, the president spoke yesterday, and he wanted to cut back taxes as well as tax reform. And I'm surprised at some people who don't want that. Why wouldn't our representative want that?
Well, they don't want it because they don't understand there's an easier, better way. I think we need complete tax reform. I don't say that just going and changing the brackets is going to do us any good at all.
Right.
We don't need taxes on our income. Now, I understand under 16th Amendment that's the rule that we have today, and that would have to be changed. But just as I was listening to the advertisement on your show just a minute ago, how much America is thriving economically or spending is up, we need a tax on consumption as opposed to tax on income. That's called fair tax, and it's a highly instructive thing to look at, and we should study different forms of taxation. And we'd get, in my opinion, the fair tax would be the best way to tax people because they're taxed on what they consume in new goods and services. And people spend their money in America. That's the general rule. If you get money, and it would relieve us of the income tax, and it would free up so much of our economy, I think.
Absolutely.
Regulations and things are hampering us.
I really, really, I know a lot about you. I've read about you. You've come a long ways. You've gone through a lot in this journey that God has given you. And I noticed that you've become stronger rather than bitter or weaker. And is that because of your strong family background and your faith in God?
Well, it is. It's a faith under God that upon which this nation was founded, and in the people of this country. I think we've got a great people. We're divided by everything, it seems, in today's society, and we should be united. And the only way we're going to be united is to go back to understand we're all created equal in the image of God.
Yeah.
And that we owe duties to each other called virtue or morality that are simply being ignored. And, government is there to guide us, but not to take over the role of God.
My final question is that I noticed that Alabama is the Bible Belt, and because of that, a lot of the values still exist. And over the years, the liberals have fought to get rid of those states and cities where the Bible Belt exists, because they know that once they can get rid of that, then they can bring in all this corruption and the destruction of the family. What is it about the Alabama folks who are holding on to those values?
Well, I think, Jesse, my opinion, it's strong in Alabama. It's strong in different states, Texas, Mississippi, Florida. But there's people all across our country that understand the knowledge of God. I think it's the effort to remove God is not going on just in Alabama. It's across the country. And it's succeeded in many areas to where you have coaches that can't kneel on the 50-yard line, as in the case that we're just talking about, that they ruled on June 26, I think, 2015. 2017, just this past June.
Right.
And it was a ridiculous ruling, but we got to understand what to do about the Ninth Circuit then. Congress has complete authority over every lower federal court. They're creations of Congress. They can be dismantled. Perhaps we need to do away with the entire Ninth Circuit, combine it with the other circuits. We've seen the most liberal opinions coming out of the Ninth Circuit you could imagine.
Yeah.
That dispute the Constitution of the United States. If people want to know what I understand about these things, they can go to my website, roymoore.org, which will lead to the JudgeRoyMooreForSenate.com, and they can learn about my campaign. What we're trying to do is educate, bring an understanding to Washington of the truth, and the truth about our Constitution and the truth about God. And that's what I will do when elected.
Well, Judge, I wish you well. I really appreciate you, and I know that you're what the country needs. So I definitely wish you well on this, all right?
Well, thank you, Jesse. And
thank you for your time this morning. And God bless you.
Bye-bye. Bye
now. Amazing. 888-775-3773. Judge Roy Moore. And that's roymoore.org, O-R-G. And that will take you to his campaign and everything else. We really need your help on this, folks.